Welcome to a review of how to get started on Homework 8, creating a dictionary from a file. So these notes will walk you through how you can create your dictionary for whichever program you have chosen. In main, I'm declaring my dictionary, nice generic name for it here because we're going to use this to demonstrate reading from the 3 different possible program files depending on the one you choose to implement for your program. This calls one function called get data from file. We're going to open the file and then you should create an empty dictionary. Then for each line in the file, we are going to split that data based on the comma into the key and the value. So line.rstrip strips away the \n from the second item, and the split will take the first item and put that into key C, and the second item into value. So let's look at the files. Here are the World Series winners. Now, I want you to go in and look at the data in your files. Make sure it looks okay. The other thing you need to check is that there are no extra lines in the file. So after the 2019 Washington Nationals, well, we could add 2020 Tampa Bay, but there should not be an extra line. So notice the cursor is flashing right there after Tampa Bay. Let's look at the other 2 files. But again, scroll to the bottom. Be sure that there's no extra lines in the bottom of the file because that will mess us up when we're trying to read the data in. And I did make a change to SA capitals, and I'll show you that change. In the SA capitals file, there used to be an extra space after the comma. And actually, what we'll do is we'll demonstrate how to make an adjustment for that. So make sure you open up and look at your data file, verify that there are no extra lines in it. If there's an extra line, it is going to fail when we go to read from the file. All right, so I'm going to close that. I have 2 SA capital files. I'm going to show you the other one. Okay. And again, let's make sure there's no extra lines here. Oh, all right, so I backspaced up and I'm using the arrow key and it won't go any further, and that's the way it should be. There shouldn't be any extraneous lines in the bottom of the file. If there are, when you go to read from the file, it's going to have trouble capturing the data into the data structure. So SA caps and World Series winners and the encrypt codes file all have their data without any space. So every one of these should be readable now by the code we have here. So let's take a look at the code. Create an empty dictionary for each line in the file, and this is why we don't want any extra lines in the file. Key C, comma, value will read the data on each line. The first item will be stored in key C. The second item will be stored in value. And then we will assign the dictionary key and value using this line of code where SA dictionary sub key C gets set to the value. So this will automatically load both the key and the value together into the dictionary. Let's run that. It's always a good idea to print out the data. So right under in file close, before I return it to main, I am printing that data so we can take a look at it. And there is the capitals with their countries. The country is the key, the capital is the value. We can use this for encrypt codes And this builds the dictionary of the encryption codes for each letter of the alphabet from little a to capital Z. So after the small letters, we start with the capitals. And then finally, let's check our World Series winners. And we see them all the way up to 2020 now. I do want to show you that SA capitals with the extra blank space. All right, now notice here, we're just splitting on the comma. So each one of these has a blank in front of their name, just for, not for the country, but for the capital. And if that's what you're asking the user to type in, it's not going to match because they're going to type in the name of the capital without a blank in front of it. This is why you need to look at the data and make sure when you read the data in, you're reading it correctly into your data structure. I see here we've got that problem. When I split, I could split on comma space. Okay, let's run this again. And we'll see that this takes care of the problem. Each one of these capitals no longer have a blank in front of their names. When you're reading from files, you need to check the data so that when you're pulling that data in, your code matches the way the data looks in the file. So be really careful about that, and also be sure you don't have an extra line in your file, otherwise the for-line in file is going to try to read that blank line, and there's nothing there to fill the value. The key C will take the end of file, but the value has nothing there to read in. And this is going to cause a problem when we try to run the code. And let's examine that too. So let's see what can go wrong. Going back to the file, and we're doing the capitals. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a line. And we're seeing we have an error. And the error, again, the message is not enough values to unpack. Expected to got 1. And that's because of that extra line in the bottom of the file that just has an enter key and no value behind it. If you get this type of error, you need to check your file, make sure you don't have any extraneous lines or data. Remember, file I/O and reading input from users are buggy parts of programs because we don't have control necessarily over what's in that file. But we do because we own these files, so we can clean them up and make sure the data is okay before we attempt to read it. All right, let's put a good one in here. This one doesn't have the blank, and rerun, and we're good to go. I will post this code for you to use to get started. Again, go in, check your files, make sure everything's okay so that your code matches your file. Happy coding!